What's up, weirdo? Shadetree Surgeon here in the WranglerStar garage, and today we're attempting to build a workbench. When I say attempting, I mean attempting. I've never done this before. I mean, how hard is it to screw some legs into the bottom of a piece of wood? But I don't want a plywood top. I want something that's going to be tough and sturdy and stand up to a lot of abuse, and I don't want to pay $600 for it. I've got enough material here. I'm going to show you what I bought. I basically got 2x4x8. They're essentially drywall studs. They're about $3 a piece. I got all thread to go through them. I got wood glue to stick them together. And I'm basically gonna sandwich these boards together to try to make a worktop bench. So theoretically, with buying really nice legs for it too, I should be able to make a 8-foot long workbench with adjustable legs for under $200. If you guys know how much workbenches cost, they cost a lot more than 200 bucks, especially if you want a big 8-foot one. So we'll see how this works out, because as of right now, I have no idea if I'm gonna be able to do this or not. Obviously, I didn't invent it. I learned this the way that people learn everything nowadays, from watching YouTube videos. Okay, what I'm doing first is I'm gonna go ahead and line these things up on the sawhorses and mark which side I want to be the top. Specifically picked out the drywall studs. I went through them all and picked out ones that were nice and didn't have a lot of surface blemishes, didn't have a lot of pock marks in them that I'm gonna have to fill with epoxy later. Now, I'm just, to do one better, I'm just picking out, I'm gonna mark top on which ones are gonna be the top of the bench. That way, I got the best surface up here. Okay, now that I got them all lined up and I know which side I want to use for my top, I'm gonna take one board, I'm gonna create a template to drill holes, so I can drill holes through all of them that hopefully line up. I mean, I'm not a woodworker, so this is not my forte. I'm not good at building things. I'm not good at building stuff with wood, but I never know when to quit, so that's about the only thing I got going for me. I got my marks reasonably accurate. I mean, good enough, right? Like I said, I'm not a woodworker. I've done some injury to wood over the years. I figured, like, even if they're not perfectly spaced exactly apart and they're not perfectly centered, it won't matter because I'm doing it to that piece of wood and that's gonna be my template. So even if it's cockamamie a little bit, they'll just all be the same amount off. Does that make sense? Okay, the idea now is that I can just take that board and put it underneath this board and use that hole to drill through both of them. We'll see. Well, I think this might just work. I'm going over and I'm using the wrong file for this, but I'm basically just knocking all these burrs off of each of these edges, only because when I bolt them all together, I don't want anything to prevent them from being able to squeeze all together, so I want all these little burrs off of here. I didn't think of this, by the way. This was in the video I watched on how to do this, and he recommended it, so I'm gonna go ahead and do it. Okay, moment of truth. I've got all my holes drilled. Will it pass through?
None shall pass. What? None shall pass. The Black Knight always triumph! Have it, Joe!
All right, we got one. Cool. Well, guys, I'm about to call it quits for today on this workbench because I need a spade bit that's bigger than the one I have to put those washers in on the other side so I can make these bolts recessed. Obviously, I don't want them sticking out like that. But I'm going to be back at it tomorrow. We're going to be gluing it together, bolting it up, and making a huge mess. I don't know. It looks like a workbench to me. It's got a top all right. I don't know if it was worth the work yet. We'll see. I mean, it's not, I haven't done any work on it yet. I guess it won't be a workbench until I actually do some work on it. Anyway, see you all tomorrow. Okay, I lied. I said I was done for the day, but me and my grotesque friend here on my face are back for more because I want to shellac this tomorrow, and if I don't glue it tonight, all I'm going to be able to do this tomorrow is glue it. So I had to go out and get a bigger spade bit so I can sink those washers in. Although I think I'm going to run into a problem here because I'm pretty sure you're not supposed to use a spade bit on a hole that's already existing. That's why they have that little screw at the end of them, like so, and it's a big one too. It's a 1.5 inch in order to fit those washers in there. So let's see if I can screw this up. This probably is not going to go well. Not what I'd call pretty, that's for sure. Holy mackerel. Wow, so much for that looking nice. This was looking so pretty before I did this. Well, it's me, what did you expect? It was never gonna go that. So yeah, that looks pretty awful. I'll be totally honest with you, I'm actually a little upset about it because I really want this this workbench to look nice. I think what I'll do is afterwards I'll just fill it in with some wood putty and try to smooth it over at the end and maybe make it look nice, because honestly I don't really have another option. I got to get these things drilled to accept those washers. Okay, for whatever reason, this side turned out a lot cleaner than the other side, so I guess now this is the front. The other side was going to be the front, but this is the new front because these look a lot better than the other side. So I basically got these bolts over here where I want them, and I've got to go ahead and put this on the other side and screw those bolts down and get out the trusty old cutting wheel. I haven't made any hipster fireworks in quite some time, and I'd say the Shade Tree Surgeon channel is overdue for some. Alright, I've got an offset that I'm going to use on this, and obviously I'm not going to crank this down super tight, but just kind of get it down. I know it's kind of tight, so I can mark it where to cut it off. Now that I got my all thread all cut to length, I'm going to go ahead and use some Loctite and get the nuts on one side and let that Loctite set up, because having the nuts where I want them on one side, then I'll pound them through and get them ready on the other side once I have all my glue on there. I'm going to be liberal with this Loctite because the whole plan is that this is never coming apart. This is supposed to be a permanent fixture. Okay, got my all thread cut to length, got my boards lined up, I got my tarp down, and it's time to, this is the point of no return, it's time to glue these things together. So the video that I watched learning how to do this was from a channel probably a lot of you guys know called WranglerStar, well over 1 million subscribers, super popular for any kind of DIY stuff, and he's the guy I watched do this, and he said it's a really good idea when you're doing this part to have help. He didn't, and I don't, and he's definitely a lot more skilled and knowledgeable than me, so it's a high probability I might screw this up, but we're giving it a whirl. So I'm basically going to do it just like I saw him do it. I got a big old gallon of wood glue here. I'm going to putty it on each side and then one by one layer these things on here, while also at the same time pushing my all thread through these holes. Seems really, really simple, right? What could possibly go wrong? Again, I'm saying he had a little trouble with this. That dude who just like, that's just what he does, he had a little trouble. I'm a little worried, but I'm gonna give it the old college try. We're going to apply this wood glue, what we'll call liberally. I'm trying to like remember. So I have the top, I have the bottom. Before I stick this on here, I need to have the next side done. All right, that makes sense now. Okay. All right, Josh, you can do this. Maybe. Okay, that's a top. That's a top. Oh, I'm freaking raining glue. My all thread started right now. That way nothing gets misaligned. Actually, I think if I just have 2 pieces of all thread instead of all of them on there, I think that'll be just fine. I'll just have to jam those other ones through there with a hammer. Okay, it's the next day. I'm back at the shop. Very wisely decided to wait till the sun went down. So it's about 9 o'clock right now. This thing's been sitting for close to 24 hours with these guys on here. So I think my glue's pretty much set and I'm ready to start finishing this thing. Okay, after flipping it over, you can see that the bottom side of this thing is pretty rough looking. Got a lot of glue sticking out. I'm not gonna put as nice a finish on the bottom, but I am gonna clean it up and of course seal it. So let's get started. Okay, that was brutal. It took me a really long time to properly sand this. I'm really tired. My camera's probably really dusty. I don't even know if my audio jack's plugged in all the way. It's about midnight right now, but I'm not giving up. Let's put some shellac on this thing, all right? And if anyone was wondering, I started with 60 grit on this and went all the way up to 320. Now I've cleaned it off and it's ready for the first coat of shellac. So one of the advantages to shellac is how fast it dries. So if this was poly, I would have to wait till tomorrow to put another coat on it. As it is, I just finished it and this is already dry and ready for me to hit it with a little bit of wet 1000 grit and then put another coat on it. So I haven't done my final sand and polish on this yet, but I will tell you, I'm not like incredibly happy with it, to be super honest. I feel like I've gotten way better finishes with stain and polyurethane. This is just like, it's kind of spotty. Like with stain and poly, I can usually get a pretty uniform finish that can get up to like a really nice shine that's easy to wipe off and stuff doesn't get into. And this stuff is just kind of like, it's just kind of spotty. I don't know, man. I don't know if I'm sold on the shellac. Maybe I put it on wrong. Maybe I did this wrong, but of course I'm going to do another 2000 grit sand on it and then buff it as well. Maybe I'll be surprised. So I'm still not getting the finish I want here. I know all you guys who know about wood are probably going to cringe right now because there's probably something for wood, but I know with poly, I've actually had really good success with Mother's Mag. Sorry, man, I'm a motorcycle guy, so when it comes to polishing stuff, Mother's Mag has never done me wrong. You know what I mean? So I don't know. This might totally ruin it. We'll see. Oh man, it's feeling pretty smooth to me. Okay, so the workbench is essentially done. I spent a really long time building this thing. The camera died multiple times, so I didn't exactly get every single step that I went through to make this workbench a reality, but this wasn't really supposed to be an instructional video because I really don't know a lot about woodworking. I am not a carpenter whatsoever. I'm actually really terrible with wood. It is not the medium I prefer when it comes to making something. Although I do enjoy doing it, it's just I'm bad at it. I'm bad at this. Eventually I waxed the top. I'm still not super happy with this shellac. I might still put poly on it. I'm not sure yet. Like I said, this wasn't supposed to be an instructional video. If you want an instructional video, I'll have the one that I used linked down below, but don't do what I did because I actually messed up a lot of things on this. Like I said, I'm not a carpenter, so and never mind this mess back here. This place is still a disaster. There's a lot of things that are not very good about this workbench. Starting with, your boy shadetree surgeon doesn't know how a planer works. So if you look at the bottom of this thing and you start over here and you go over here, you'll notice that there's some missing over here because I wasn't sure how a planer worked. I know for you guys who work with wood, you're gonna laugh your butts off and you're gonna think this is so stupid. I'm so glad I did this on the bottom, by the way. I don't know why. I just thought that, oh, it's a planer. It's like I just turn it on and I'll just take like an eighth of an inch off the whole thing. I'll just run it over the whole thing and it'll take an even eighth inch off the entire bottom, making everything even. Well, stupid me, obviously it's not doing it all in one go. You're doing it. So I was just like, man, this still looks even. So I did the same spot a couple times. I was like, man, it really looks uneven now. I'm like, oh, duh, it takes an eighth of an inch off every time you run it over that. So I came really close to ruining the whole project and I felt so freaking stupid, but you know, I want to share the mistakes that I made. The other one you saw me make was these front holes that I forgot to countersink them before I drilled the holes in them and totally messed that up. Another idiot move on my part, because I don't know about wood because I'm not a carpenter, is I wanted this table to be 30 inches wide. So I got 15 2x4s because in my head, a 2x4 is 2x4 inches. Again, you guys who work with wood all the time, you guys who are actually carpenters are going, wow, you are a moron. They're not 2 inches wide. So when I went to put my legs on it, which are designed for a 30-inch wide table, after I had finished everything and completely coated it and it was waxed and ready to go, they were too long. So I had to take my freaking cutting wheel and lop some of the table off, which now also leaves it slightly unsteady. I'm telling you, a lot of stuff went wrong with this. So the problem is now the table is slightly unsteady, not only because I planed it very poorly and the feet aren't sitting right, but also they're not as long as they should be. So, I was going to bolt it to the floor anyway, but now it definitely has to be bolted to the floor because there's no way that this would be usable as a workbench with like my drill press and a vise on it wobbling like this. So all in all, I built a pretty piss poor workbench. So I know a lot of people, when you're first seeing it and things always look better on camera, you're going like, oh wow, that thing looks great. Trust me, it's not. I did a bad job, but I did it. So why? That's the real question. Like, why didn't I just buy a workbench that would have probably been vastly superior to this? It would have been sturdier, it would have sat on the floor better, and all it would have taken me is the time it took to go down to the store and buy it. And instead I slaved for days and actually probably spent more money than it would have cost to just buy one making this one. So I don't know, man. I'm tired of talking to the camera in here. I'm sweating in here. We haven't ridden the Rocket 3 in a while. Let's go ride the Rocket 3 around and we'll ask ourselves, why DIY? The Rocket 3. This is the motorcycle everyone seems to love to forget when they say stuff like, Shadetree Surgeon is a Harley-Davidson channel. I own 5 motorcycles and only one of them is a Harley-Davidson. And this motorcycle is my pride and joy, baby. There are a few things that do to me what the Rocket 3 does. It's loud, it's uncomfortable, and it'll set your pants on fire. But boy, does this thing go fast in a straight line. Well, it doesn't do me much good if you stop. I love that. They're like, oh no, I'm gonna run into them. And then instead of like just going or anything, they just stop directly in the way. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense. As I was saying, here's the funny thing about DIY. So you take this workbench that I just slaved for the past week building, fretting over it, worrying about it, stressing myself out, thinking I'd ruined it multiple times, and finally coming up with a product that literally is essentially substandard to something I could buy in a store. You might say after that, well, hey, at least it cost you a whole lot less money, but it didn't. So the materials themselves cost me like $150, $160, right? So for $150, $160, yeah, I bought everything I needed material-wise, but I didn't have all the tools to make it. So between buying tools, between buying hardware, and then buying stain, and then buying the wrong thing, opening it, not being able to return it, and between all the gas I spent going back and forth to Home Depot, because like I said, I'm not a carpenter. I don't have my crap together. This isn't something that I normally do. So between all of this and all the mistakes I made, I literally spent the same amount of money. And that's not even putting like a dollar amount on my time, like the hours and hours it took me because I don't know what I'm doing
to build this thing. If I put a dollar amount on my time, I mean, it cost me more to build this bench than it would have cost me to just go to the store and buy one. And much, much less more than it would have cost me to get on Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist and buy one used. So why did I do it? Why did I bust my head against the wall and freaking go through all this stress and heartache and annoyance at Home Depot because I absolutely hate going there? Why did I go through all this to spend more money to make a substandard product? Now, I'm not saying it would be a substandard product if you knew what you were doing. Like WranglerStar, the guy whose video I watched, he built an amazing workbench. I didn't because I'm not as good at that kind of stuff. The principle is there. Like, if you know what you're doing and you have all the tools, you can do this for cheaper. That's just not how it was for me. So why do it yourself? And like I said, I'm not a carpenter. I'm not good at this sort of stuff. In order to make that substandard workbench, I had to try so hard. You have no idea how hard I had to work to make that. Like, it wasn't just like, oh, I put in the minimum amount of effort, and that's why I have a product that isn't as good as a store-bought brand. Like, no, man, I tried my freaking hardest. I tried so hard to make that a good workbench. It just wasn't happening, man, because I suck at this. But here's the thing. Here's why I did it myself and why I wanted to do it myself. Because I wanted to see if I could do it. I started watching these videos and I was like, man, I want to make my own workbench. I want to make it myself. And I know I'm not a carpenter. I know I'm going to try really hard and it's not going to be as good as somebody else's or as good as a store-bought one. But I know when I look at that workbench, even though it cost me more money, I know that I built it. And I know that not only did I build it with my own hands, I know that I tried so hard, that I put so much effort into it. It wasn't just like I'm just going to slap this together. Who cares? It's just a workbench. Like, no, I tried really hard to make it nice. I wanted it to look beautiful. I wanted people to be impressed by it. That's not really the case, but still, I tried very, very hard. And it feels good to look at something. And even if it's not the greatest, it feels so good to look at something and know that that's you doing your very best. I can look at that and say, maybe if I practiced a bunch, I could do it better. But at this place and time in the universe that shade tree surgeon occupies, that's the best I could do. That is peak performance from shade tree surgeon when it comes to workbench related activities. Got like a little shake in the headstock here. I wonder, my tire might be low on air. It does, but the tires on the Rocket 3 always feel like they're low on air. Or it might be time for some neck bearings. It wouldn't surprise me if it needed neck bearings. This is a big old heavy bike, so it'll go through them. What'll happen is the bike will actually wear a groove in the neck bearing from just like bouncing up and down on the road and going straight. And then that's a lot of times why you see that head shake, is it's just kind of shaking around in that groove a little bit. Anyway, I digress. I know more about motorcycles than I do about creating stuff out of wood, than I do about carpentry. And I don't know a lot about motorcycles either. I just know enough to get myself in trouble. It's so funny, but there you go. Every time I use that workbench, I'll know that I built it. I know that I tried my hardest. I'll have all the memories of the frustrations and the triumph and the coming to terms with the fact that it's going to be uneven and having to accept those facts. I've got all that. Every time I use it, I'll think about that. Every time I look at it and I run my hand over the finish and feel that it's smooth, I'll know how many hours and hours I spent sanding it. I just sand it for like 6 hours straight because I was afraid to use the planer anymore. I sanded it so freaking hard, like if I just made the sanding perfect, I could sand away all my problems. Oh my God, it's so emo, but still manly at the same time. I guess I'm gonna head back to the shop and bolt my substandard workbench to the floor. God, I mean, it's kind of funny. It is really kind of funny. Like I said, though, I get to know every time I use it, every time I look at it, I'll know that I did that and I put it together. And that's a good feeling. And that's really why we do it ourselves. I mean, that's why DIY is because when you use it and when you utilize it, you'll feel good about it. It's just very pleasurable to use something that you built yourself, that you fixed yourself, that when it does the thing it's supposed to do, you just get this warm and fuzzy feeling like, yeah, man, I did that. And sometimes it costs more than just buying one. In fact, a lot of times it does, because of all the tools and everything else that goes along with it and making mistakes. Like, you end up spending more. So there's some people out there like WranglerStar and other guys who are really good at this kind of stuff who, like, it costs them less. They know what they're doing, and it costs another guy like me more because I don't know what I'm doing. And I'm paying extra money for the experience because I want to use it later and say, I did this, I built this. And that feels good, man. It feels real good.
All right, guys, that's gonna about wrap up this video. I appreciate y'all watching. I appreciate you subscribing. I appreciate all my Patreon people. You guys rock, and you keep me doing this and keep me sometimes spending more money than is necessary to do it myself instead of having somebody else do it. I'm gonna get this sucker bolted to the floor and enjoy my workbench. As crappy and as uneven and as poorly stained and waxed as it is, gonna enjoy it. Till next time, y'all, keep it weird.